Welcome to the Dr. Josh Axe Show, where each and every week I dive deep into the science and principles behind how to grow in body, mind, spirit, and take your health and your life to the next level. Today I'm going to be diving into a topic that's gaining more attention as we become more connected through technology. It is EMF radiation. And I'll be going through exactly what you need to know, how to protect yourself, and really how dangerous are EMFs exactly. Well, I will tell you from the start, some of it is hard to know, but there are studies now and more emerging in terms of some of the dangers around EMF. And here's the reality. You're exposed to electromagnetic fields every day, from your smartphone in your pocket to your laptop computer, to wireless earbuds, and we'll break down why this is a problem and explain practical ways to stay safe. Plus, stay tuned, because at the end of this episode, I'm going to be interviewing an expert on this topic who's going to share his top tips for reducing EMF exposure. We know, listen, we're all going to be exposed to EMF radiation. The key is lowering it and only having it certain periods of time, which we'll get into. Before I dive into the content, though, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the link on the show notes to subscribe to my weekly wellness newsletter if you want to get my top tips for natural healing delivered straight into your inbox on a weekly basis. So here's what EMF stands for. It's electromagnetic fields. These are invisible energy waves or currents and a type of radiation. And they're emitted by electronic devices, especially those that rely on Wi-Fi. And they allow devices to communicate via Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and cellular signals. And there are really two main types of EMFs. There is non-ionizing radiation. These are low-level EMFs from Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and cell phones. And then there's ionizing radiation. These are known as high-level EMFs, and you're going to find these in X-rays and UV rays. And ionizing EMFs, like those found in X-rays and CT scans, are known to be more dangerous due to their DNA damaging potential, whereas non-ionizing EMFs, like those found in Wi-Fi and cell phones, are typically less harmful, but are now thought to pose a health risk if exposure levels are high over long periods of time. And here are some of the everyday devices that emit this non-ionizing EMF on a regular basis: cell phones, laptops, tablets like iPads, Wi-Fi routers, Bluetooth devices such as headphones, speakers, and watches, smart home devices, and microwaves and other household appliances. Whereas environmental sources include power lines, smart meters, and 5G towers. Now, with the rapid increase in wireless devices, EMF exposure levels are higher than ever before. I mean, think about it. If I go back and I think about when I first got a cell phone, that would have been back in, I want to say it was 2002. So that was it was a little over 20 years ago, okay? But if I had to go back 25 years, I mean, our exposure was it was very low, very, very low, almost nothing. Now I think about the average person, and you have a cell phone sitting in your pocket for most people, or their purse, on them almost all day long. And then you've got a computer, and then you've got television, Wi-Fi going around your house. And so, I mean, today we're bombarded with probably 100-fold EMF exposure. Now, here's what some of the statistics say. The average person spends over 10 hours per day on electronic devices such as a phone, TV, and computer. And about 95% of Americans are exposed to daily radiofrequency radiation from cell phones. And EMF exposure from Wi-Fi and cell towers has increased considerably in the last 2 decades, as we've been talking about, especially in cities and crowded areas. You know, we were recently on a ski trip to Park City, and it was so crazy because I tried to use my phone and I could hardly use my phone there. And I'm like, this is so crazy. And this is people out snow skiing, okay? So everybody's snow skiing, but there's not a single person on the lift or at the bottom of the hill, or even people at the top of the mountain who aren't filming themselves out there or on having a conversation on a phone. It's sort of crazy, you know, rather than, you know, sort of basking and taking it in. I needed to call Chelsea just to check in on the two girls. And that's just an example of how much radio frequency there is, especially in more crowded areas like cities. Now, here is something that you need to be aware of. There's ongoing research focused on the potential negative impacts of EMF radiation exposure, especially long term. And studies have linked EMF exposure to headaches, fatigue, sleep disturbances, which I think is maybe the single biggest thing, so sleep disturbances, issues with brain function and development, including during pregnancy and childhood, fertility issues, and higher risk of certain types of cancer. And in July 2024, over 250 scientists signed a petition calling for stronger regulations on products that emit EMF radiation. This is based in a journal called Science-Based Medicine. And a class action lawsuit was filed against Apple and Samsung, claiming some of their devices emit radiation above the federal safety limits. And the University of Colorado biochemistry professor Jeremy Phillips explained that placing the AirPods in the ear canal exposes the tissues in the head to high amounts of radiofrequency radiation. And Phillips says this increases the risk of tumors and other conditions linked to abnormal cell function. And I just want to share something personally. I've used earbuds in the past, and until I saw some of the research here on how much radiation exposure it could be having. And now what I have is I actually have a simple, like I had in the past, it's Bose, it's like a wire, it's a wire cable that actually plugs into my phone. And so anyways, just being more cautious and conscious about using things like earbuds and some of these other, again, anything that's using in higher doses this radiation exposure. Now, let me say this. I think if somebody's using earbuds for 30 minutes a day on occasion, and I'll get into this in a minute, your body can deal with a certain level of toxicity. Your body can deal with a certain level of radiation. However, some people are wearing them all day, every day. And that's what this really, I guess this is the warning I have for all of you, is that your body can deal with some Wi-Fi. Your body can deal with some EMF, okay? Our bodies are really resilient to certain levels of toxins. I mean, listen, we're exposed to toxins every single day. There's hardly a person watching or listening to this that doesn't drink plastic on a regular basis or doesn't breathe in fumes from cars, these environmental pollutants constantly. I mean, so our bodies can deal with a certain level of radiation. One of the things that starts to happen with most people is what they call it the bucket effect, where, okay, you have this radiation that is adding to your toxicity in your bucket. And then you're drinking from plastic bottles. And then you're using parabens and all of these other chemicals. And then you're getting a lot of these PFAs from Teflon pans. And finally, your bucket overflows and you come down with a toxic illness, okay? And that overwhelms your liver and your lymphatic system and your kidneys, and actually making your organs sick and diseased. Now, again, having almost none is the best, but I think for some people you can tolerate a level of toxicity because God created our bodies to be able to deal with a certain level of pathogens and invaders and toxins. However, know that most people, this is adding to your toxic load. To be on a device for over 10 hours a day and to be wearing earbuds or all these other things for several hours a day is absolutely adding to this toxic burden of your body. And the International Agency for Research on Cancer has classified these EMFs as possible carcinogenic to humans based on limited evidence linking EMFs to childhood leukemia. In 2018, the National Institute of Health study, here's what they found. A 10-year-old study, the most comprehensive one to date on EMFs, found a significant link between high EMF exposure, like those involved in 3G cell phone networks, and increased cancer risk in male rats. The exposed rats were more likely to develop cancerous tumors in their hearts and brains, according to the 10-year study. So listen, there is evidence, and anyone who says otherwise isn't reading up on all the research, there is evidence that EMF radiation over long periods of time can cause cancer along with other neurodegenerative and toxic illness. And what happens with EMFs, I want to explain how this works, is it disrupts your cellular communication. And by the way, cellular communication is really one of the hallmarks of aging or anti-aging. And so if you are aging more quickly, your body has poor cellular communication. In fact, one of the things that medicinal mushrooms do, if you've ever used anything like reishi mushroom or cordyceps or chaga or done any sort of medicinal mushrooms, is they enhance and support cellular communication because they have a unique type of polysaccharide called beta-glucans. And these have benefits for this. Well, what EMFs do is they damage and disrupt that, and for the negative, not allowing your cells to communicate in a healthy way. So if you think about it, your body responds via electrical signals, okay, and via chemicals. Well, radiation is a form of energy that disrupts that, okay? And so imagine that you've got if you've ever tried to, use your cell phone when you're in a parking garage or in an elevator, right? You're in an elevator, all of a sudden it goes out, it stops working. Think about EMFs the same way. They keep your hormones, everything from thyroid hormones to testosterone to estrogen, signaling properly. It keeps from the brain sending signals to your lungs and to your bowels to move and to just for your body to function properly. So think about EMFs in that way. They are disrupting cellular communication. And studies suggest that EMFs can cause increased oxidative stress and inflammation due to how it alters cellular communication. And this has also been linked to DNA damage. This is why, again, it's one of the hallmarks of aging when you disrupt cellular communication. A review in the International Journal of Oncology found that chronic exposure to EMF can damage your DNA strands. And also it harms neurodevelopment. Some research links EMF exposure to sleep disruption, brain fog, and anxiety. And that is one of the key signs that you have poor cellular communication is number one would be poor sleep. If you are not sleeping properly, there tends to be an issue with your circadian rhythms, which is connected to your cellular communication. Another one is brain fog. Another one is mental issues like anxiety and depression. There tends to be issues with those cellular communication. And then the other one is hormone imbalance. If you have major hormone issues, that can be linked to that as well. Now, as we're talking about hormone imbalance, there are studies proving this as well, and some evidence that EMF exposure may not be noticeable in the short term, but can have cumulative effects on your health, especially with sleep, fertility, and mood regulation, as I mentioned. So fertility is another big one, and it impacts your endocrine system. EMFs can disrupt melatonin production, leading to poor sleep. That disrupts your other hormones like cortisol, causing cortisol to rise, which then disrupts insulin, which causes inflammation and balancing your blood sugar. And we've talked about this before, and I've talked about this many times on the podcast, that when you tip off one hormone, like cortisol or insulin or others, it literally impacts every other hormone in your body. And so that's what's happening with these EMF signals. It's you're putting your body, certain organs, you're putting yourself in an elevator, and now communication isn't happening between the different systems and the different organ systems of your body. And so that builds up this disease in your body. And one of the big things is disrupt sleep and hormone imbalance. And there's a great study to prove this on sleep. There was a study published in Environmental Health Journal, and they tested sleeping in a bed that protects against electromagnetic fields. And after 2 months of using an EMF blocking bed, participants experienced increased levels of DHEA, serotonin, norepinephrine, melatonin, oxytocin, and testosterone, along with reduced cortisol and improved cortisol to DHEA balance. Participants showed a reduction in biological age as measured by the immunity clock model, indicating a slowdown in the aging process, while the placebo group showed no changes whatsoever. The EMF blocking bed improved the stress response, sleep quality, hormonal balance, and suggests potential benefits for longevity as well. And so as we're talking here, these different types of EMF exposures from your cell phone, from your computer, on a regular basis, they disrupt cellular communication and cause hormone imbalance. If you're a person with hypothyroidism, infertility, PCOS, or low testosterone, you want to move the phone away, move the computer away, do as much as you can to limit your exposure and protect yourself, which I'll get to more in here in a minute. Next up is male fertility concerns. A number of studies have found that EMF exposure causes reductions in sperm count. Men who check their cell phones more than 20 times per day have been found to have reduced sperm motility by up to 30%. Also, for women out there, reduced pregnancy rate. A 2024 meta-analysis in the Environmental International Journal found that 110 animal studies found that EMF exposure was linked to a reduced pregnancy rate and reduced sperm count, as we talked about. Also, a 2023 study showed that EMF may increase the risk of miscarriage. This study found that wireless devices may increase the risk of miscarriage in pregnant women. Women with high exposure had a 1.69 times higher risk of miscarriage. And again, we're talking about cellular communication here, which is then disrupting your hormonal signals. If you're disrupting estrogen, progesterone, oxytocin, some of these other hormones, it's going to increase the risk of everything from decreasing conception to increasing miscarriage. And so we really want to do everything we can to limit our exposure. Now, I want to talk about children for a minute and then get into practically how to do this, and then do the interview here where I'm bringing on the expert to go through how to limit your exposure. Children are commonly exposed to EMF due to their use of electronic devices for school, entertainment, and just regular communication. According to a review in the Clinical and Experimental Pediatrics Journal, a child's developing nervous system absorbs more EMFs than adults do. So did you hear that? Children on devices are absorbing more of the radiation than adults do. Now, part of it is due to their brain isn't fully formed, or their skeleton, their skull, some of these other protective bones in the body are more cartilaginous and they allow more through. And research shows that EMFs can impact children's nerves and muscles and cause body temperature increases, such as warmth from a phone or laptop use. Long-term effects potentially linked to neurodevelopment disorders such as hypersensitivity of numerous things, maybe even food sensitivities. Animal studies show prenatal exposure may cause brain cell loss, memory impairment, and changes in the blood-brain barrier. And of course, there is the study or multiple studies showing EMFs increase the risk of leukemia in children. But there haven't been consistent findings in that. But again, there are several, not just one, several studies proving that. Now, let me go through ways to reduce EMF exposure. Okay, number one, know this: distance matters. Avoid holding your phone directly against your ear or laying it directly on your body, such as having it in your pocket. Even if it's a few feet away on your desk, it's much better, men, than having it in your pocket by your testicles. Again, this is going to reduce sperm count according to the studies. So you don't want it touching your body. Ideally, a few feet away actually makes a significant difference. Number two, avoid wearing Bluetooth devices for long periods. Use speaker mode on your phone instead of actually having those earbuds in your ear. Okay, and this is how I walk around oftentimes when I'm on my phone. A lot of times I have my phone on speakerphone, or again I have those other headphones plugged in. But I do speakerphone probably more than anything myself, and that is probably one of the best things you can do. Next here is limit your call times. Avoid long phone calls that are near your ear. Again, the better thing is have it on speakerphone. Here's another big one: keep Wi-Fi routers away from bedrooms. Now, when we had our first daughter, Arwen, when she was born, Chelsea and I actually got a EMF detector in our home, and we tried to have our nursery and kids' bedrooms away from that electronics closet with the Wi-Fi. And then here's another thing we did. We actually put a timer on our Wi-Fi. So it was something like at 9 p.m. every night, the Wi-Fi shut off, and around 7 a.m. Every morning it turned back on. So while we were sleeping, there was absolutely no Wi-Fi in the house and everything was on airplane mode. And that's really the key here. Listen, you are not going to, 99% of you aren't going to completely eliminate all Wi-Fi and all EMF exposure. However, if you, while you're sleeping, and for us, it was really, like I mentioned, it was probably about 10 hours in a row, we had almost no exposure in our home and around us because we had turned everything off. We had a timer that shut it all down. That is significant. And that's what you want to do is, again, you're not going to completely eliminate. You want to reduce your exposure as much as you possibly can. And again, at night, it's just that simple. Put your phone on airplane mode. Shut your Wi-Fi off, put it on a timer. It's that easy. Now, here's another thing is you can hardwire whenever possible. Switch to Ethernet cables instead of Wi-Fi for work setups. It's a great thing to do. And here's another one. Use EMF protective gear. EMF shielding stickers, cases, and grounding mats can also help reduce exposure. I would just say, think the long game. I mean, having something on your phone for one day may not make that difference. But if you think about it right now, let's say some of you are, I'm 43 years old. Let's say I'm going to be using I don't know, Wi-Fi stuff for, let's say, at least another 50 years. Well, 50 years of reducing the exposure makes a big difference, right? So you want to think about the long term for your kids, the long term for you. This is why I do like these EMF protection cases and stickers in order to protect yourself. You know, I want to also mention just another expert here who has shared, a colleague of mine, his opinion about EMF exposure. It's Dr. Andrew Huberman. He's a neuroscientist at Stanford University, and he's emphasized EMF management. He says, rather than complete avoidance, he says, there is sufficient data suggesting that proximity matters. Keeping devices away during sleep is one of the easiest ways to lower exposure. And so, very similar thing to what I mentioned. He also advises limiting its nearness to your reproductive organs, especially your brain, and again, your reproductive organs, keeping those away. He also recommends putting your phone out of reach or turning it on airplane mode whenever possible. So very similar recommendations to what I had there as well when you're looking at the other people that are looking at the research and wanting to be protective of you in the community. Let me say this too, there are scientists out there, there are people in the scientific field who say, well, there's really not much evidence against EMF exposure. These people remind me of the food dye people that are like, hey, use as many food dyes as you want in kids' cereal. It's a very similar thing. It's only minimally damaging or only in high doses. Well, if kids eat this every day and they're getting multiple doses and they're 5 years old, well, and they do this constantly until they're 95. Well, first off, they likely won't live to 95. But what's going to happen by the time they're 35 and 45? You're aging them faster, right? We even saw EMF here. You're aging yourself faster. And so, all that being said, the people that are minimizing things out there and saying, well, again, a little bit of food dye, a little bit of EMF exposure every day, all day, isn't that big of a deal? I know that I wholeheartedly disagree with them, along with a lot of the other scientific people out there who are looking at the medical journals and saying, you know what? First off, we only have a lot of short-term studies here, but the long-term studies show, yes, there is some damage, even if it's minimal. When you add that minimal damage on top of glyphosate in our food and all the plastics and all the other things, it all adds up over time. And this is where I've taken care of tens of thousands of patients, and I've seen this, is that they have had, they took a few antibiotics when they were kids, and then they took some aspirin, and then they started, a lot of EMF exposure, and then this, and then this, and then finally they come down with an autoimmune disease or brain fog, or chronic pain, or some sort of major medical issue, hypothyroidism, and they can't figure out why. Well, it tends to be all these things added up over time. So I know this will make sense to you as we've been talking about. Now, I do want to mention a few foods and things that I think can reduce your toxic load and can support you along the way. If you want to support and heal your body, and you've been exposed to a lot of different radiation, one of the best things you can do is seaweed. Spirulina, chlorella, sea moss, different forms of algae, doing these greens is very supportive of helping cleanse your blood. And they've been used for thousands of years in Chinese medicine and Ayurveda and even Western medicine today, showing that there is some level of absorption there or protection against heavy metals and radiation. So I'd encourage you doing things like super greens powders is a great thing to do. Also, just increasing your consumption of steamed vegetables. They are very detoxifying for your body. Fasting at certain times can also be beneficial as well. And then herbs like milk thistle and dandelion and burdock and schisandra and turmeric also are good for cleansing the body and supporting liver and lymphatic detoxification as well. All right, I want to talk to you about some of these EMF blocking tools, and they're designed to reduce your exposure to these electromagnetic fields by either blocking or absorbing or even redirecting EMF waves. And here's how they typically work. So I want to go through, if you're interested in using any EMF blockers or protectants, how those work. Number one are some of these EMFs, they have shielding materials. And EMF blockers often use conductive metals like copper, silver, aluminum, or special fabric blends. And these materials create a barrier that reflect or absorb EMF radiation. An example would be EMF shielding blankets and curtains. These contain metal fibers that create a Faraday effect to block signals. And phone and laptop cases lined with conductive layers reduce exposure to the body as well. And another one I really like are EMF stickers. These use a small amount of metal to reflect EMFs away as well. Another one is Faraday cages. A Faraday cage is a structure or enclosure made of conductive material that blocks these electromagnetic fields. When EMFs hit the cage, the electronic charges in the metal disrupt and cancel the wave inside. EMF blocking pouches or cell phones and wallets act as mini Faraday cages to block these signals. And you can get these sort of cages or these stickers that work as well. Number 3 is grounding and absorption. Some tools like grounding mats or anti-radiation pads aim to absorb EMFs and reduce their impact. So grounding mats can be a great thing as well. This is something actually my mother-in-law bought Chelsea and I grounding mats for Christmas, which is something we now have on our bed as well. And you have grounding mats are great as well. Number 4, reducing signal strength. You guys, by the way, you all should see my my Christmas list every year. It's always, it's got a lot of this sort of stuff on it. So, all right, number 4, reducing signal strength. Some EMF protective tools just simply reduce the strength and dampen these Wi-Fi signals. Number 5, specialized paint and fabrics. Again, they may have things like carbon or certain metals in them. Or again, like we talked about with clothing, these fabrics that reduce or absorb EMF exposure. And one particular device or tool that I really like, I want to share with you. It's called WaveBlock. This offers easy to use EMF protection stickers for phones, laptops, and wireless earbuds. In fact, I remember this is years ago. My wife bought WaveBlock and we put it on our phones. This was years ago, and we've been using them ever since. And one simple application can significantly reduce your radiation exposure. In fact, lab tests show that EMF meter readings dropped from 452 to just 56 after applying WaveBlock stickers. And this is something I've put on the back of my cell phone here that we've used on a regular basis, is these WaveBlock stickers. And WaveBlock stickers break up EMF radiation waves, dispersing them into smaller, less harmful particles before they reach your body. Sort of picture yourself standing on a beach as a massive wave approaches. If you're in the water, the wave could knock you down, but if you're on the shore, you only feel a harmful mist. So they don't block 100%, but they block a large majority of the radiation exposure. And this is patented technology. WaveBlock is the only company with a patented solution for radiation exposure. So when my wife Chelsea was doing the research and brought it to me and I read the research, I was so impressed with them because they actually have a patent on this. And they've done extensive testing. Their stickers are tested by the FCC accredited labs to ensure they deliver on their promises. And so again, I really, really love this as an example of something that is a great tool that's so easy. Buying a sticker, putting it on your computer, putting it on your iPad, putting it on your cellular phone, of something that is going to greatly, greatly reduce this exposure. So I want to take a moment now and bring on Ben Salem. Ben Salem is the founder of WaveBlock. I'm going to have him share right now for a little bit exactly what WaveBlock is, how it works, and how it can reduce EMF exposure and help protect you and your family. Go ahead and take a listen right now. Today's episode is brought to you by WaveBlock.com, your go-to resource for EMF protection. Did you know that wireless devices emit radiation that can negatively impact your health? WaveBlock offers lab-tested and verified stickers that reduce EMF exposure on AirPods, cell phones, iPads, and MacBooks without compromising performance. They're simple to apply, effective, and deliver peace of mind. Visit WaveBlock.com to learn more and use the code AXE, that's AXE, at checkout for a special discount. Join tens of thousands of people, including myself, in using WaveBlock for protection. You'll be glad you did it. I'm excited for the health and protection this is going to bring to you and your family. Myself, my wife Chelsea, and all of my patients I encourage to use WaveBlock to protect themselves from radiation from devices. Hey everybody, we have Ben Salem here, as I promised, from WaveBlock. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Well, I'm excited you're here. I had mentioned on the show that my wife Chelsea turned me on to WaveBlock a few years ago when we were looking for ways to protect our family against EMF radiation. And we did everything in our house from putting a timer on to make sure our Wi-Fi was shut off to even looking at different materials like blinds and curtains and things to reduce EMF exposure. And we really wanted to find something for our tech devices, our computers, our cell phones. And that's when we came across WaveBlock. And my wife, Chelsea, said, hey, I want you to put this on your phone. Got me something. We put it on the phone. And actually, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see here, I've got my protective covering here of WaveBlock on the phone for EMFs. But first question I have for you is, how did you, what motivated you to want to start to develop this technology to start to protect people against these side effects of 5G and EMF radiation and all of the, all of the radiation out there?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I remember learning that certain countries have banned Wi-Fi from nurseries and kindergarten, like Belgium, China, Israel, Italy. And it was always in the back of my mind. I thought, what do they know that we don't know? And then when that pandemic hit, and my kids were constantly on Zoom classes, and they're rocking the earbuds, or they have their iPad over their lap, and I have a lot of spare time locked up at home. It got my mind thinking, I wonder if there's a way to reduce some of this radiation. So what I did was I converted my home office into a Faraday cage. So I actually wrapped my entire office, about the size of this room, with silver and polyester, wrapped up everything. And then I bought directional radiation meters, and I purchased everything that they sell on Amazon and off Amazon. And what was fascinating was nothing worked. But not only did some of these devices not work, some amplified the radiation. Because if you were to take a piece of metal and put it behind your phone, and you're hitting one of the antennas. There's 5 antennas behind your phone, and you hit one of those antennas, you're actually going to amplify the signal. So then I thought, I wonder if there's a solution. How can I solve this? Everything I tried, nothing worked. And about 6 months in, I was with my family at the beach, and I was daydreaming, and I was thinking, if a wave hits me right now, the wave has enough power to knock me over. But once the wave hits the ground, you're just getting the mist, and the power has broken. Everything is dispersed into the ground. And then I got my mind thinking, I wonder if I could do the same thing with light, or if I could do the same thing with radiation. So I went home and I started powder coating different materials. And one of the materials that I came up with worked at home in my Faraday cage. And as soon as I saw that it worked, I just Googled who is the largest FCC lab in the world. Where does Apple go to? Where does Samsung go to? And I went to those same labs and did the due diligence there. Wow,
it's amazing. One of the things that I have a question about is, why is it that, and this is somewhat rhetorical, but feel free to answer as well, why is it that the U.S. is always sort of the last to try to protect our kids and our families against everything from food dyes to BHT to environmental toxins to radiation? I mean, it seems like when I think about other countries, especially Italy and Israel and Sweden, I mean, these countries are much more protective against their citizens from environmental, toxins and things like radiation than America is.
Yeah, I wish I knew the answer to that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it probably has something to do with money and greed,
right?
But we can move on from that. But I do think that in America, there definitely is the God here. It tends to be mammon. It tends to be this sort of financial progress above everything else.
Yes.
And I think that that's also why, the FDA and the pharmaceutical companies are able to get away with what they are, allow things to pass the way they are. And I think, unfortunately, one of those things is radiation. Based upon your research, one of the things I did cover in this episode was some of the big side effects we see with radiation with people, everything from, cancer, of course, is one of the big things, to brain fog and a number of other conditions. As you have talked to probably by now thousands of people that have been affected by this non-ionizing radiation, what are some of the biggest symptoms and warning signs that you've seen in people that say, okay, you are overexposing yourself or your kids to this form of radiation.
It's interesting. I did not know there was a problem until we started to see the reviews come in. So a lot of our reviews, people will say, I no longer have a foggy brain. I no longer have headaches. I sleep better. So we see those reviews over and over and over again. So it means that some people are more sensitive to EMF than others. So I think that's really interesting. But if you look at studies, there have been studies done, right? There've been many studies done on mice. And what they realized is that when they exposed the infant and the baby mice to radiation for a couple hours a day, about 3 hours a day, what they found out was when they put the mice, they did a control study with controlled mice that were exposed to EMF and the ones that weren't controlled to the EMF. They put them in the maze, and what they found was the mice that were exposed to the EMF made double the mistakes as the mice that were not exposed to them, and their memory loss was 3 times as more as well, which is really fascinating. And it showed that they're more hypersensitive, and they lack fear, which is really fascinating.
I want to mention the hypersensitivity thing. One of the things I remember when I was in full-time practice, one of the things we would do a lot of times with children with autism and children with hypersensitivity issues is we would actually put them in certain types of chamber where these EMFs and all of the Wi-Fi, all of these signals were completely gone. And there was a really powerful calming effect on these kids when we were able to remove all of these different forms of radiation, all of these different forms of energy that were sort of coming in from the outside. And so I know that this is definitely something that especially parents who have kids that, again, have hypersensitivity or on the autism spectrum and others have probably seen with their kids that these what would maybe seem like little disturbances can actually have a really big impact on their health.
Definitely. What's really fascinating is it's the duration of time and the proximity that it's to the kids, right? Mm-hmm. None of this has ever been tested.
Yeah.
It hasn't. Even the iPads, they were not meant to go on the kid's lap. They were meant as tablets to go on the table. So those were not tested like a cell phone. And the testing that they did do on the cell phones in 1996 was on a human who's 220 pounds and 6'2". And they said the average time this human's going to be using their cell phone is for 6 minutes a day. So what happened to testing it on babies and kids, right? Our kids' skulls are much thinner than ours, and their brains and heads is smaller than ours too. So they absorb up to 10 times the radiation as we do. So, but none of these tests have been done.
Yeah, it's crazy, and we see this with everything from vaccines to medications to a lot of technology today, to where they really have not had the rigorous testing that people deserve.
Right.
And to know that they're safe, to know that their kids are safe, and it's really unfortunate. And one of the reasons I want to have you on here is I want to get into a little bit of the practical of, okay, one of the things I covered on the show was, okay, we can't fully reduce our exposure, right? And so the big thing we want to do is just reduce our exposure, and our body can deal with a certain level of toxins and radiation. Our body's meant to deal with it. It just can't handle it 10 plus hours a day, every day for your whole life. And of course, kids can handle much less. What are some ways we can protect ourselves? One of the things I mentioned is that Chelsea and I have been very conscious with our family of saying we want to protect our kids. We want to protect ourselves and our family members and do the best to limit our exposure. And everything from, we mentioned the timer, I mentioned having this, WaveBlock on my cell phone in order to protect myself and our kids from this radiation. Talk to me about how these work. So you've created technology to put on very simple, a sticker that you can put on the back of your phone, on the back of your iPad. You have things for actually watches, for a number of pieces of technology. How do these work in reducing the radiation?
So every sticker is engineered for that phone model. So there's no such thing as one sticker fits all, because it wouldn't work. And we also don't want to block the radiation. The phone is smart enough to know that if you block the radiation, it's going to increase the power and the antenna is going to get stronger. So we have to be really careful. But there's 5 different antennas behind your phone that we're trying to reduce the radiation for, right? So, for example, you have Bluetooth, you got 5G, you got 4G, you got your GPS, right? And so on. So what WaveBlock does is that when the antenna's radiation hits the WaveBlock material, it disperses the radiation. It breaks it into small particles. And you could actually test it yourself by taking a flashlight and shining it at the material. You'll see that the light breaks up, like a prism effect.
Wow.
And again, it's non-conductive and it's not made out of metal. That's the key. So it reduces the radiation from the back of the phone and from the front of the phone. And we have multiple SAR tests and RF tests from FCC accredited labs, and even U.S. Army engineers tested this because they thought, how does this really work?
I love when we first sat down together, you had this stack of papers here of all of this, medical research you've had on showing the percentages of decrease of the exposure and radiation. Could you walk through just a few of these percentages, because I found that to be so fascinating.
Yeah.
And what you were sharing with me, and some of your recent test results and how well this works.
Yeah. So, for example, let's pull up this lab report. That's for our new product that's not out yet. That's a cell phone case. We did testing on that. But for example, on the back of the phone, you're getting about a 73% reduction.
Wow.
And on the front of the phone, you're getting about a 50% reduction. And on the AirPods Pro, you're getting an 87.5% reduction.
Wow.
And the AirPods, I think, is even more important than your cell phone, because the kids are wearing those for hours and hours a day, and oftentimes they fall asleep with them.
Wow. I mean, what's that doing to their brain? And I know this is true because I know that there are kids out there that maybe fall asleep listening to an audio, well, probably less audiobook, more YouTube videos, but doing that. So what are those headphones doing to someone's brain exactly?
Yeah. And that's what started this business by accident. This was never supposed to be a business. This is not what I do for a living.
You wanted to protect your family.
I just did this to find a solution for my kids. And the AirPods is what got me really nervous, because what I did was I just looked at the schematics. I Googled the schematics of what's inside the AirPods. And what I've learned was it's not your old school Bluetooth that you and I grew up with that goes between 30 to 33 feet. This is the Bluetooth 5.0 version, which can actually talk to each other. This Bluetooth could talk to each other at 1,200 linear feet. That's the same as 2.4 gigahertz wireless modem. So basically what that means is that
you basically have a modem like sitting in both ears at the same time.
You have a wireless modem really close to your brain, touching your skin, and they're talking to each other through your skull, shooting radiation back and forth, back and forth. So what's really scary about this is that people think, well, it's only Bluetooth. Well, that Bluetooth bandwidth is the same bandwidth as 2G, 3G, and 4G. It's that strong. It could go through walls.
So one question I have for you, Ben, is should people be sleeping in something like their Apple Watch?
Again, that's a lot of time to have that Apple Watch emitting radiation that close to your skin. So I think it's a little bit dangerous, because there is proof that it does actually disturb your body from making more melatonin, which is what you need. Yeah, and
it's wild to me because there are people out there who are saying, well, there's no research to prove this. Well, do you want to wait till there's research to prove it? And when you look throughout history, there have been so many people in the medical community that said, well, smoking's okay for you. Asbestos is pretty safe. These certain things, thimerosal, mercury found in silver fillings, or certain shots or things like that. Hey, those are safe as well. Come to find out years later, after cover-ups or people saying, well, I didn't say that. Well, you realize, well, no, this is dangerous. Then become banned or outlawed. Right. And oftentimes, again, the U.S. is sort of the last country to do this, as we've talked about. You see other countries, as you mentioned, like Israel and Sweden, and Italy and others that are saying, no, we actually see the writing through the wall. We can sort of extrapolate and look at the data here and say, we don't know for certain, but in all likelihood, this is damaging our kids and adults in some way.
Yeah, for 100%. And just because it's non-iodizing, it doesn't mean that it's not going to create any harm in the future. Yeah. It doesn't mean that. I mean, I remember being in an airplane going to Europe with my parents and smelling the cigarette smoke, and taking a blanket and covering my face and saying, when is this going to go away? My nose is burning. My throat's burning. And then they said, oh, yeah, secondhand smoke is not safe. just like they said, vaping is not safe, but they did say it was safe in the beginning. And the red dyes, they just right now we're waking up to the come on. So at least we have a plus with Kennedy coming in.
It is. I'm excited about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Yeah. He's somebody, I spoke with him years ago at an autism conference that Jenny McCarthy was putting on. And one of the things I respect about him so much is that he really cares.
Yeah.
He really cares, and he wants to help save kids. He wants to help get people healthy. That's his number one agenda. And so it really is and I'm excited to see kind of what he comes in and does in the whole, in the whole industry. One of the other things you have here is you have created some new technology that you're doing around, like I said, iPhone cases. That's another one there. So it's pretty amazing some of the innovations you've been coming up with in order to protect people. What is the best place if somebody's saying to themselves, okay, I want to be able to get one of these stickers or a case in the future or something in order to protect my family and I, where can they learn more about you and this incredible product?
Yeah. So on our website, WaveBlock.com, you could actually look at the lab reports, download them, and you could purchase there as well. And for every item that we sell, we donate one as well. So at the end of the year, if there's an organization that you guys want us to donate or anyone wants to, we're constantly donating. Churches, temples, ski teams, little leagues.
Wow.
So yeah, our mission is to protect as many kids as possible.
That's so great.
I think the number one thing that parents need to look out for is all the devices that are catered towards kids, which is really scary. They have socks that read your vitals, and they're constantly shooting radiation into your toe. They have mattresses that are constantly reading the vitals and sending signals to the parents. They have bottle warmers. They have so many things out there that we shouldn't really be using. It's so scary because the baby's still developing. Another thing that I noticed in our house, which had the most amount of radiation, which was really shocking, was our smoke detector. The antenna on the smoke detector was the same strength as the antenna of our Wi-Fi router. And that was right above the baby's crib. Another thing that I noticed that had the most amount of radiation is behind the wall where we have our TV, we have a sound bar. And the antenna on the sound bar is massive. The radiation would go right into the baby's crib. All these things while your baby's brain is developing, all this radiation around, is just so scary.
And this is something that, again, a lot of the scientists and people aren't necessarily thinking about. They're saying, well, we tested something in 1996 and it was an old version of a phone and it's relatively safe if you use it for 6 minutes. We're talking about, for most people, 24 hours a day to some degree, there's some level of radiation exposure. And a lot of times it's much higher for about 10 hours a day. And it's not coming from one single device. It might be coming from 20 different devices, everything from a TV to a soundbar to a phone to multiple computers to your neighbors next door. I mean, it is, all of this stuff adds up on the body. And one of the things I talked about on the show is it's like a bucket effect. You're adding, okay, you got radiation, but then you also have environmental toxins and you have pathogens and Lyme and mold and all of these things start to add up. And I'm sure this is one of the things you hear from people, of them saying, you know what, one day finally I got to the point and all of a sudden I started having the brain fog. I started having the headaches. I started having the neurological symptoms and my hormones being off, my energy in the tank, the weight gain. This is what I hear. I mean, I'm just sharing. I mean, I know you hear it because this is what I hear from people who have a lot of these different, toxic illnesses.
And what's really sad about this whole thing is people are trying to find these sleep aids to help them sleep. The Oura Ring, the watches, right? But those actually, and there's proof, that low Wi-Fi or Bluetooth actually interferes with your melatonin production. So it's actually causing and making everything worse.
Yeah. One of the things I do want to mention, because I'm actually wearing an Oura Ring now. So one of the things I liked about the company is it doesn't go all the time. It actually has a timer to where it actually only turns on for certain periods and it turns back off. But to your point, there's Whoop, there's others that are worse too. I mean, there's a lot of the technology that's on 24/7, a lot of the things reading vital signs that are, again, they're constantly giving off those sort of signals. And again, as the part of the principle here is it's constant bombardment. And so what you want to do is, again, like one of the things I love about this case is you mentioned in this, 70% of the time, or it's reducing 70% of the ionine radiation. And so that's great for me during the day when I am going to use a phone, because I'm a human being that's, needs to talk to my family and run a business and do all the things. And then in addition, though, like I put it on airplane mode at night and we shut off Wi-Fi in our house. So we're able to greatly reduce our exposure. Think about this. You can reduce your exposure radically by simply buying a WaveBlock sticker or WaveBlock piece of technology, and getting a timer and doing things like having your phone a little further away from you, putting on airplane mode. You can reduce it up over 90% and be protective for you and your family. And these are simple, very easy things that anyone can do at a very low cost. And so, Ben, I'm such a fan of what you're doing. That's why I wanted to have you on the show, is because you're really someone out there that I love, that's fighting for kids, fighting for families, trying to protect people against something that in some studies have been shown to have cancer-causing effects, to really disrupt the brain and the nervous system. And so I think the work you're doing is just incredible. Any last words of advice for people in terms of, your encouragement to them, or something that they, just leaving them just some food for thought in terms of what they can be doing proactively?
Yeah, a couple things. Most importantly, I think that some people think that the 5G is worse than the 4G.
There's a lot of people. Yeah, actually, I would love to hear your thoughts on the 5G versus 4G.
Yeah, it's actually not. So the way that it works is 5G is pulsing. It pulses really fast. It can't go through walls, and it can't go the distance of the 4G, 3G, and 2G. The 3G, 2G, and even your Bluetooth have the strongest power, and those will actually can go into the human tissue up to 1.6 inches. They can penetrate up to 1.6 inches. Okay, the 5G can only penetrate up to about 1 inch or 3/4 inch. It doesn't have the same bandwidth, because what it does is it goes up and down and it shoots and it pulses. The 3G, 2G is a straight line, more of a more mellow wave that shoots straight, a lot more powerful. But the goal is, what they're trying to do, and hopefully they don't do this, is their goal is to do 20 Gs and to put that in every single person's car, so the cars are pinging off each other. So now we're kind of getting microwaved.
Wow.
Well, then now we're looking at the proximity and the duration of time. Then yes, that could equal more radiation accumulative, right? So then the whole game changes completely.
I think you need to work with Elon Musk and create a barrier on cars, like a paint. And by the way, I'm sure you'll maybe come up with this at some point, but in terms of just, protecting the entire car from it when we get to that point.
It's scary.
Wow.
It's scary. I've talked to some of the big manufacturers, and that is their goal, to put 20 Gs in every car.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I think right now I'm working on something. I'm pretty close to getting it done. I've been working on this for the last 8 months. I'm coming up with an app that's going to be designed for anyone. It's going to ask you 10 questions, and it depends on how you answer these questions. It's going to tell you how much radiation your body is absorbing per day. It's smart enough to know what device and what antenna is being emitted.
Wow.
And the goal is to give you a score. They'll say, hey, this is your score out of 10. This is the highest radiation. You are at an 8. If you do the following, this, and this, now your score is like at a 2. So for example, how far is a Wi-Fi router from your bed? How far is a Wi-Fi router from your office desk? Where do you charge your phone at night? How many feet is it away from you? It's gonna do that and then give you the solution. So the goal is to educate people as much as we can.
I love it. It's so great. Ben, where can more people find out about, again, you and your devices? So waveblock.com.
Yes.
And I just, spelling is just like it sounds, very easy. WAVEBLOCK, waveblock.com. You can check out the research. You can buy the products. Again, the simple stickers like I have, and just putting it on the back of your phone is a great example of something you can do that's going to make a big difference in your health, in your family's health. And so again, WaveBlock, and you're on social media as well?
Yeah.
So it's WaveBlock?
It's WaveBlock Tech. Instagram.
Okay, and Instagram, WaveBlock Tech. Follow Ben, follow the incredible things he's doing here to help protect us and our families and this nation and from the effects of radiation. Hey, and Ben was generous enough today to offer 10% off anybody who wants to get a piece of technology or device or a sticker to protect yourself. Simply go to waveblock.com/axe. And you'll get 10% off your first order today. I want to say, hey, thanks everybody for tuning in here to the Dr. Josh Axe Show. Remember, each and every week we're diving deep into the science and principles behind how to heal in body, mind, and spirit. And again, I want to say thank you to Ben Salem for coming on today. He's the founder of WaveBlock. I want to encourage you to check out their amazing products. Also, hey, thank you all of you that are sharing this podcast and show. There are millions of people that need to know the truth about 5G and 4G and radiation and how to reduce the exposure. I really believe that when you're sharing this, you can save and transform someone's life. So thank you so much for that. I also want to say thank you to all your subscribers out there for being on mission with me. I can't wait to see you on the next episode.